Welcome to the FemiNinja Project. I am your host, Cheryl Ilove, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the FemiNinja Project. Welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and I have a fantastic guest with me today, and she has quite the story to share with us. It's a very tough story, but it's one of hope, it's one of survival, and one of even thriving through the experience of love, loss, and light, and that's actually the name of her book. It is Love, Loss, Light, and illuminating the path through grief. So I'm just going to welcome Karen Trench.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
I am so excited to have you with us today, and I'm just going to ask you to tell your story.
Okay. Well, how do I begin? At the beginning. What happened to me was quite shocking. On April 6th of 2015, my husband, Charlie, my husband of 23 years, didn't come home that day. And I discovered that he took his own life about 6 hours after I knew something was amiss, when he didn't come home for a very important phone appointment that he had scheduled. And I knew something was wrong because in the 23 years that we had been together, we always kept each other apprised of what we were doing and our schedules. And I knew that when he didn't come home for an early dinner that day, and he didn't call and he wasn't answering his cell phone, that something had happened. At that moment in time, I didn't know what had happened. But I called my sister, Kathy, who lives not too far away from me, and she had known Charlie for all the years that I'd known him, and I said, this is very out of character, and I'm very worried, and she came to my house right away, and we started to phone hospitals. We actually called the Aurora Dispatch, a non-emergency dispatch number in Aurora, hoping that they could help us. And I really didn't think that I was going to hear anything. But I was surprised when the woman on the other on the line said, did your husband have an appointment at the VA hospital today? And I was taken aback because Charlie was a Vietnam veteran and he did get his medical care through the VA. And I'm like, well, how would she have known that? So I knew then that something was definitely amiss. I thought, okay, what's going on? But she didn't have anything to offer. She said, call back in a little while. And we were calling area hospitals, jails. I got his business associate on the line with me, the man he was supposed to have this important phone interview with early that afternoon. He knew Charlie. He was worried. It took me several hours of being frantic, Cheryl, I knew something was wrong, for sure. And my sister tells me I said this, and I don't really remember, but I guess I did. I said, let's go upstairs and check his gun box, because I'm wondering if maybe Charlie took his own life, committed suicide.
Okay, so I just have to stop right here because your phone went off.
Yeah.
And it sounds like angels. Yeah. And it's like...
exactly. It's like, what is that about?
Starting to get chills.
Yeah, what is that about?
Is that kind of like
oh my goodness,
a message or a signal?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That was very strange.
Because, we can tie that into something later in your book, but continue with your story.
Anyway, we, against all hope, at this point I was frantic and Kathy was just trying to keep me calm. And we went up to the bedroom where he had the lockbox for the gun, and I opened it, and the gun was missing.
Oh.
But the clip of bullets was there. So Kathy was thinking, well, maybe he hid the gun someplace else in the house, separate from the bullets. So for a moment, I had some hope, that maybe against all hope that was the case. But it was very shortly thereafter where I was just frantic, and Kathy said, I'm going to call the original dispatch, the non-emergency dispatcher that you'd spoken to earlier. And when she called this woman, she said, someone has to tell my sister what's going on. And the woman said, now there's a detective on the case. So I knew.
Yeah.
And, she said, they'll get back to you as soon as possible. And it was very much after, 3 minutes after that phone call, where the phone did ring. And Kathy was holding my hand, and I picked up the phone, and sure enough, the detective on the line said, I'm so sorry. He said, I wanted to come to tell you in person, but I know you're frantic to know something, and I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but your husband took his own life this afternoon at the VA hospital in Denver. And at that moment, Cheryl, my world as I had known it, the person who I was up until that point in my life was gone.
It's almost as if that person died along with Charlie.
I absolutely just, as I say in the book, it's as though I split open, and every molecule and every atom that had comprised Karen up until that point, everything just bled out into the universe. Just, and I just felt like I was this empty vessel. And I knew, that was happening on a spiritual or on another level that I can't even explain where my mind was at, right? Because physically where I was at was the moment that I heard this news, I dropped to the floor, and I was writhing around in like sheer agony, screaming bloody murder. I mean, it was like... And my windows were open because it was a beautiful spring day. I'll remember that. And I was worried that the neighbors are going to worry that I was being harmed. I was just writhing and screaming no over and over again. No, no, no. My sister was leaning over me saying, just keep breathing. I don't want to lose you too. She really thought that I was just going to fade away on her. So all of that was happening kind of all at once. But I knew in that instant that I kind of was this empty vessel, and that I was going to have to figure out a way to fill myself back up, to get beyond the unimaginable and imagine a way to reinvent myself or transform myself, or that I had changed. In that moment, I really had already transformed.
So in that moment, even going through that reaction, you had that cognitive thought somewhere deep in your brain?
Yes. It was almost miraculous, I say now, in hindsight, when I think about it, because I also knew in that moment, and as I describe in the book, that I had this, it's like this undying, or it was a knowing, an undying faith or belief or knowing that I was being held. Whether it was in the arms of angels, if you will, by the source, I say God, the source, the one, the creator, that, exactly, the angels, right? That they were holding me, and that I wasn't going to fall so far down into the rabbit hole, right? That I would never be able to climb back out again. So all of this was happening was like this thing congealed. It was like this perfect storm of spiritual, mind, body, physical, converging, so that physically I was writhing on the floor, but spiritually I felt like, okay, this is what has been placed before me. This is on my path now. My whole life has just shifted in an unimaginable way. But you know what? I feel supported and loved, and I'm going to get through this.
Wow.
I'm going to get through this. I will not let this destroy me.
Wow. That's so incredible. That is so powerful.
I don't know where it came from. It just happened.
But you talk about it in the book, and the way you write about it and the way you express it is just so beautifully written and so heartfelt.
Oh, thank you, Cheryl. I get chills.
Well,
I think maybe Charlie's here. When I get chills all up and down my body like this, I feel energy. I feel his presence. Thank you.
I hope he doesn't mind.
Thank you for sharing that.
I hope he doesn't mind being in the girl cave here with us.
No, he would love it. Are you kidding me? He was always surrounded by all my sisters. Charlie was surrounded by more women when he was with me in my life than men. So he loved it. He just loved it. No, he loves the girl energy.
But it's just so... to be able to have that kind of focus and expression of your loss and your path and that journey through it. And even though, you knew at that moment, you would transform yourself, but it was not an easy path.
No, not one bit, Cheryl. I mean, I really was desperate, I didn't know how I was going to survive. I think that from early on, though, I'm very blessed in my life to have very close family and friends. I have childhood friends. Most are in the East Coast, but we've been friends forever. I have very close family members. My mom is still alive. She was 87 at this time. She lives in Connecticut. But I think that was a big piece of it for me. And I do write about that and the blessing of others, that to really lean on other people during that time, and they let me however my grief looked or felt or whatever, they just were the container for me, and which was lovely. But early on, what started me healing very early on was I was desperate to know that there were others like me who had suffered a profound loss of some sort and survived it. I needed to read other people's stories and words about how they managed it, because I figured if they could do it, then I could do it. So I sat in what I would call the healing chair. It was this leather chair in my front room, the sunroom, if you will, overlooking this beautiful tree out in front. And I spent a lot of money on Amazon. I must have read 40 books. I'm not kidding. I think it was more, Cheryl. On grief, loss, other people's experiences. And that really sustained me. That's kind of what pushed me through that part of it. And I also was just by chance got a brochure in the mail from the Great Courses. I don't know if you've ever heard about the Great Courses. It's a wonderful set of courses. Everyone should look into it. They offer courses on either DVDs or what's the other way, maybe
CD,
or maybe even video, but on all kinds of subject matter. And one that crossed my desk was one on mindfulness practice, which was a very Buddhist way of approaching this experience, was to stay present and in the moment, and to meditate, to be at peace with what was going on, to kind of make, like Rumi says, to make friends with your grief, right, and sit with it and allow it to just move through you and out of you, and to live in very much like an Eckhart Tolle, living in the present moment, moment to moment to moment. Because if you could breathe within each moment, then each moment leads until the next minute, which leads into the next hour, and that's how you survive. It was like, for me, it was like just getting through the next day, then the next day and the next day. And so mindfulness practice really became a very important part of my healing.
Well, you did use an awful lot of alternative practices, that kind of launched your very important part of your journey.
Yes, very much so.
But I want to get back to when you were talking like the blessings of others, which I thought, everything in your book was just absolutely beautiful. But I think when you don't have that kind of support is when people really flounder. And, so it's important. I think one of the many reasons why I wanted to have you on my show today is to emphasize the importance of having other people and other relationships in your life. And that when you do see somebody who's suffering, to reach out to them and give them any kind of comfort that you can.
Absolutely, Cheryl. And it's important, as I say in my book, look, everybody, folks, I'm blessed with that support system. There are many, many folks, many people in the world who don't have that for whatever reason, and so they're going through something like this, and it's profound, and they don't have other people. But they can have other people. I mean, even if they don't know them, there are so many support groups and grief groups and even online support. There are therapists, whether it's private private therapy or group therapy. I say you never have to bear your grief alone unless you choose to. I mean, that is a choice, right? So you have to honor everyone's journey is their own.
Exactly.
And it's unique. And so some people may not need to have that support or not seek it out. But if you choose to, there are myriad ways that you can, seek people because people want to help more than anything. They really are there to help. All you have to do is ask.
There is one part in your book, and this is a little bit closer toward the end, when you're talking about how some people don't really know how to respond.
Yes,
and I mean, I see
yes,
that
yes.
a lot in a variety of different situations.
Yes.
I mean, even when, I told you both of my parents had been ill at the same time, and then my mother passed away. And just like 2 days later, it was the day after the funeral, I had to take my father back up to the hospital because he was dying at the same time.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you. It's in some ways it was an incredible story. Who knew they were that close to each other? So I took him, and of course this was the same place where she had gone for all of her hospitalizations and treatments and stuff. So he was on the same ward, the same unit. And, everybody's very nice, very businesslike, professional, checking him in and stuff. And I thought, man, no one's saying anything that they must have known because she had been a patient there. And at one point, his nurse came in and we were talking and I says, well, we just lost my mother. My mother died, 3 or 4 days ago. And she goes, oh, I know. I saw that. I just didn't know what to say. And my father and I just looked at each other and I said, it's okay. We know she's dead. It was like, you're a medical professional. You can't even say, I am so sorry for your loss. It's just really funny. But people in our society, and you did address that, just kind of shy away from stuff like that.
Yes. I mean, there is a stigma against death in our society, certainly against a suicide death, right? Although I chose and I decided very early on that I was never going to lie to anybody when they asked how Charlie passed. And I've been honest right up front, and I've gotten nothing but beautiful support around that. But, that said, there is a specter, and I think that when there is death, people they get it's holding the mirror up first to them, right? Because of their own mortality. And it's like, oh boy. And so they get uncomfortable, and sometimes they don't even look at you. They just don't know. And I say, you know what, folks, just shine a light of compassion on them because they don't mean any harm. I mean, I had a girlfriend, Cheryl, call me 2 days after Charlie passed. I couldn't even feel my body at that point, right? I'm still out of my body somewhere. And she wanted to have lunch with me. And she said, let's go to lunch. And she was well-meaning, but totally off base. I couldn't even move, let alone think about getting dressed to go and have lunch. But again, I just shined, if that ever did happen for me, I just shine the light of compassion on folks because we all get uncomfortable. We've been on the other side of that where we've had to pay our condolences and you don't really quite know what to say because you don't want to say the wrong thing. So some people don't say anything. But I do believe everyone's heart for the most part is in the right place.
Well, you used the specific words.
You remember?
Yes.
I'm impressed.
Oh, I thank you. I have a mind like a steel sieve. Some stuff stays and some
What did I
stays.
say?
Well, the other word you used was mercy, to have a heart of compassion and mercy for them because they could be suffering in a way that's far different from your experience. And like you said, just having to confront it face on, they just don't know what to do. And to be that disconnected, or socially inept to be able to handle a situation like that, you've got to feel for them.
You've got to. You have to just let that go. I know that there have been many, and I've spoken to folks who get very incredulous and very hurt and upset when the wrong thing was said or nothing was said or however that looked for them. And I honor that reaction too. But, in my experience, my feelings, it's just give people a break. They really just don't know what to say. Sometimes it's uncomfortable.
Well, and not only that, you don't know what their history is.
And you don't know what they're experiencing exactly or what their experience with people with loss is. So again, I say shine the light of mercy, love, and compassion on them.
You are such a good person. There's something else that you said in your book, and you said this pretty much right on. It was probably the second or third page. I'm not really sure.
Okay.
My brain isn't that good.
Okay.
But it was along the way that you were saying that you would never, hide the fact of how you lost your husband. But you also said that in this process, and right from the very beginning, you realized you were so much stronger than you thought you ever were.
Yeah. These are the, it's like the light shines through you only when you're cracked open. And,
Good point.
And I really believe that you don't know. And so there's beauty in I said there's beauty in loss, but you don't really know, I think, what you're capable of until you experience something that, and that can, whatever that looks like for a person, right, Cheryl? Because, and again, grief comes in many forms, right? Grief comes from loss, and loss comes from many forms, not just the death of a loved one. So, but when you're up against it, it's usually it's usually those brought to your knees moments and experiences in your life where you just shine, or you can look at it as an opportunity to pick yourself up and to be stronger and more courageous than you ever thought you could be. I mean, you are tasked with that. You do have a choice, right? And it looks different for everybody. But I chose to just kind of look at the bright, the silver linings, I guess, in the pain and suffering.
Well, and I think you were very clear about this in your book, that you said like the process, the grieving process, it gave you many opportunities to learn some valuable insights as well as some valuable lessons. And just as you said, loss doesn't always come in the form of, the death of a loved one. We all have so much that we go through in life. That's just a part of the experience, the human experience.
Human experience.
Exactly. So as I was reading your book, even though, it is a book on grief and the loss of your husband, I realized that every lesson and everything in the book can be applied to any situation that somebody might be going through that's very difficult or challenging, or the cut off your knees or cut off your legs, right at the knees type of situation. So the lessons in the book and the insights, I think, could help a lot of people through a variety of different experiences.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yeah. I guess for me, what it boils down to with this particular experience is the more love we have in our lives, the more love we're blessed with, the love of our family, friends, pets. I mean, the more love we have, the more loss we're going to have.
Exactly.
And so, as I say in the book, it's like, bring it on, If I have to, depart this world with a heart filled with loss and grief and pain and suffering, well, wow, how lucky am I? Because that means that I also was blessed with equal measure of love. And that's what the human experience is about. It's about gathering in, right? And then having to let go. It's bringing in and folding it into your arms and holding on to it for as long as you have it, and then learning to, when the time comes, release it. And with the release, of course, that's the challenge, is the letting go, right?
If you love something,
let it go, right? But that's very much easier said than done.
Of course.
I'm still learning after 5 years. There's some aspects of his loss, and I'm still learning how to let go or to accept or to come to grips with. But again, I think that I was looking at this, the silver lining in this is that, wow, the more love we have, the more loss. That is the human experience. That's just part of being human. And I just feel blessed with having so much love in my life, and having had the love of Charlie in my life, because it was deep and profound for 23 years.
Wow.
Letting go, it sucked. And did I want that? Was I ready for it? Did I want more? You better believe it. I wasn't ready. And yes, I did want more, but I had to learn how to accept it, his choice, but how to let it go. Just knowing that the love never dies, the love never goes anywhere. For anyone, our love is what is eternal. So that never goes away. And that's the blessing right there,
So prior to this happening, did you have that type of a philosophy of life?
That's a good question, Cheryl. I think that I've always been an optimist. I'm always a half glass, the glass is half full kind of person. But did I have it to that extent? Not to this extent. Not to this extent. I think this was a big wake-up call for me. Oh, yeah. I mean, this was the big one that was like, the 2x4, But I do believe that my optimism, I am kind of an optimistic person. Maybe that helped. I'm a lapsed Catholic. I don't know if that matters, but also what this loss did was, and I think that I mentioned in the book that is probably one of the greatest blessings, is that it really deepened my spiritual practice. That I did come through this, the other side, with a deeper appreciation and knowing that it is all about the love, and that we have to just the longer we live, we're going to have more of the loss. Exactly. And that's just and that's the way it is. I mean, my mom's 90; she's going to be 92 this year, and she's seen many of her friends pass, and the older you get,
right?
But to me, it's like I said, it's the greatest blessing.
Well, I think what I got from the book is that your spirituality definitely grew, and you got a much deeper appreciation of, God, the One, the universe, Mother Earth, whatever you call it, life, exactly. And I found that really intriguing because you all kind of combined the, traditional beliefs with the Buddhist belief, and I mean it's very all-encompassing.
Yes,
but it's basically it's saying the same thing.
It is,
and it comes down to that four-letter word that you keep saying.
Yeah, it's just love.
Exactly, it's love and life.
And life, exactly. I could say love, lost, life.
Actually, yeah.
I mean, I stepped into the light, right, because it's the dark period. You're going through, the dark night of the soul, as they say. And with every loss, there is a dark night of the soul that you have to reconcile, and you have to just work through. But it could be love, lost, life, because you step back into life again. Now your life after a profound loss usually, it doesn't look the same.
No, it isn't the same, and you're not the same person.
You're not the same person. I say that I was not the same person, Cheryl. The second after that, I got the phone call.
Right.
That person who picked up the phone before the detective told me what had happened. That person didn't exist in that moment after I got the phone call. I was a brand new, it was like the slate was wiped clean, and I was like, okay. And I knew my whole life had shifted and changed. But you're not supposed to be the same. Nobody can be the same after having suffered a loss of any kind. Now, it could be even the loss of your health.
Oh, yeah.
You know that, right? So it could be the loss of your money. It could be the loss of your reputation. It could be the loss of your looks, right? It could be the aging process. I mean, people grieve in all sorts of ways. But, as you're grieving and you're reconciling through the loss, you change. It's like you're transmuting. You're taking that grief and it changes you, almost like on a molecular level, I think, so that you're not the same person.
But it can change you
loss.
In a positive
very
way.
Positive. Yeah. Yes, I hope I'm making that.
Oh no, that is very clear. But I just wanted to reiterate that.
Thank you,
for
Cheryl.
my listeners.
Very positive ways.
Because especially the aging process happens for most of us.
Well, yes.
And like my mother always used to say, it beats the alternative.
And my mom still says that. And I always quote Betty Davis, who said, aging ain't for sissies.
Oh, it's not.
But that is also a form of loss when you're aging, right? You're losing your youth.
You are. And I'm trying to look at it, because we're about the same age.
Yeah.
And I look at it as this transition,
Yes.
transformation through life.
Yeah.
And in the new book that I'm writing, and there I am, the little 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's been a pretty good ride. It hasn't been easy. There's been a lot of loss and heartache and pain and suffering. But to be at this point and making it through, I want to high five myself. And I think that happens to those of us who get to be a certain age and we survive and thrive after a series of hits, that it's like, well, okay, bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on. And I think I'm just as shocked as you are about my resilience over this. I mean, I never expected that I would come out stronger on the other side and more resilient and, with a deeper spiritual practice. And I feel like I want to high five myself sometimes.
Well, there you go.
We should high five each other.
There you go.
Okay, there we go. So thank you.
So funny. Oh, well, but on the other flip side, it could go the other way. Absolutely. And I know a lot of people kind of fall into, bitterness, despair.
Yes.
And there was one quote I think that you said in the book, and it was something about anger. It was like, I sat with my anger until she finally told me.
Her name was Grief.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other, yes, anger, well, these are all stages of grief that one can go through. But yes, anger is absolutely one of those stages, and you have to allow for that. You have to definitely allow for that. You have the process of grieving. You just have to allow for whatever it is you're feeling, and everyone's going through it differently, and we have to honor everyone's journey through it. But we are the choices that we make as well. And so anger, absolutely you choose to be angry, not even choose. I think anger just comes as part of the steps, one of the 7.
And I think in some way it's healthy.
There are those steps that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross does talk about. But on top of that, you also have choices as to how you're going to handle it. Every step of the way is your choice. Now, some people do choose, Cheryl, and God bless them. They feel better maybe wallowing in their pain. Maybe what happens is that grief becomes a comfort zone for them. Their grief becomes comforting. And I do talk about that. It's very easy to wear this cloak of grief and keep yourself covered there because it just feels good, and so people linger there for a long time, perhaps.
Well, it's easier than trying to break through. It's so much work.
Absolutely, it's so much work, and not everybody. I honor everyone's journey is their own, and so there is no right or wrong way. It's what works for that person.
Exactly.
This is my experience this was my journey that I shared, my story. It looked a certain way, but I'm also very mindful of the fact that it looks different for folks, that and you make allowances because again you can sink into bitterness, you can sink into despair, you can sink into the loneliness, you could go to all of those darker places, if you will, and stay. But if that's what a person chooses to do, then it's meant for them to do that for whatever reason, and then they work through it or not, as the case may be. So their grief journey can look very, very different than, for instance, mine or another person's. But from my perspective, it's a choice. And we do have that choice every moment of every day after we have had a grievous loss of some sort. How do we want to address this? How do we want to deal with this or not, as the case may be? And we get to choose. And I guess that's part of the beauty of having, again, being human. We get to choose how we want to approach our lives. And that's in every aspect of our lives, right? Even with loss.
I'm kind of getting with you, and this is after reading the book, of course, is that one of your choices was to see the blessings. And you start every chapter, except the first 2, I think, the blessings of.
Yes.
The blessings of, Gosh, what was it?
I can read a couple of them really fast for the readers. For the listeners. I begin with the blessing of providence.
That's it.
The blessing of a candle flame. The blessing of love, of patience, of transformation, of surrender, of others, of silence, nature, and wisdom, of forgiveness, of affirmations, of acceptance, and of moving forward.
And there's one thing that ties into that too, is I want you to tell our listeners who you dedicated the book to.
I actually dedicated the book to every reader. Whoever is reading it is who the book is dedicated to.
That is so sweet. That is just really, really sweet.
Thank you.
So what else, would you like to share with us about this journey, about this process? I mean, I can't, even when I first met you, and that was just in December, and when you were telling me the story, I was like, oh my gosh, you had so much composure and so much grace.
Thank you, Cheryl.
As you told your story, and I was just blown away.
Thank you.
So,
I just feel, I felt compelled early on when I was reading those 40 books or 50 books. I knew immediately, very early on in my journey, that I wanted to give something back to a person who was in pain and suffering and in grief. I didn't know how that was going to look at the time. And I thought, well, gee, maybe I'll become a grief counselor. I just knew it was so important to me. And through therapy, I've had therapy sessions, and I had a wonderful therapist, and Nancy. And during one of our sessions, and this was about a year into my grief journey, maybe a year and a half, I was telling her, I really want to give something back. And she said, well, what's your God-given talent? See, she asked the right question. And I said right away, writing. And she said, well, what are you doing about that? Now, I had been keeping a grief journal. And so I said, And I write about that in the book, about how I went home from that appointment, and I felt like that was the day I got my life back, that God or the source, the one, had, it's like the aha moment, like, oh my gosh, my life is beginning again. I know what I want to do. I know what I need to do. I need to write. And I started another project, and won't get into that, but it was a project, an anthology of the 1960s. Because I was born, I wanted to do something about the 1960s, being an old hippie myself. But I knew almost immediately after I began resurrecting this old project that I'd been working on with Charlie in the 1990s. I said, no, God, the source, my angels, they all said, Karen, you need to write your story, and you need to do it right now. And I put everything aside, Cheryl, and for a year and a half, I sat at my desk and I wrote this book. And I feel so grateful that, because my whole goal was, yes, to get it published, and I self-published this. But my goal was to get it published so that I could help, and I know it sounds altruistic, folks, but this is my God's honest truth. If I could help one person, just one person, feel better as they're going through their journey through grief and loss, then my work on this planet is done, and I'm good to go. And that was it. And so I've done it. And I'm very proud of it. And I hope that helps. I feel it is helping.
It is beautiful. And you have won an award.
Good to go. And I have won an award through SIPA, which is our Colorado Independent Publishers Association. I was honored to win the award. My cover won first place.
Oh, wow.
Michael Molinet, great designer. But I'm just pleased that I did it, and I think Charlie, I know he'd be very proud, and it makes me feel like his death was not in vain either, that there's some positive that will come through, into the world, that has come through into the world because of my experience and what happened to me, that I'm able to share it in a very positive way in hopes that it will help other people. And that's my story.
Well, I don't want to give too much away because Yeah, I just, I want people to get your book.
Yeah,
and it is
thank
just
you.
full of such fantastic information. So how can people get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me through my website, www.karentrench.com, KarenTrench.com. You can purchase my book through that website. You could go to Amazon and purchase my book there. I'm trying to think of where else. Facebook. I'm on Facebook. Just look up my name, author Karen Trench. Should I give my email address other than my website address?
If you
people
like.
want to, get a hold of me, this is an easier email. It's my name, Karen Trench, 0512@outlook.com.
Okay. Wonderful. And you also are available for book clubs?
Yeah, book club, book
speaking,
signing, events. Yes, I am available to speak at your event or to do a book signing or however you want to utilize me. I'm available.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being here. And I have
honor.
to tell you that of all of my belts, the one that I am the most proud of is my white belt.
Oh, okay, because Cheryl's got lots of belts, you guys, hanging on her wall. I mean, she's a remarkable woman, and I mean a lot of belts over there.
It's a lot of belts.
Gosh,
but the
God
one
bless
that
you.
I am so proud of is the white belt because it signifies new life, looking at life in a different way, and just having the courage to go and continue a journey that you never really expected.
Oh my God. You're going to make me cry. And it's got the Yin Yang, which is my publishing company.
And here's a Kleenex.
Thank you. I'm so moved. Thank you, Cheryl. What an honor.
I'm
so honored.
I am honored to have you as my guest. I'm so honored to have your beautiful voice.
It's amazing. Oh my gosh.
You are truly
a white belt.
You're truly an inspiration.
What a gift. Oh,
truly
thank
an
you,
inspiration.
Cheryl.
So you
Thank
really
you.
should look up what the white belt represents
will.
because it's rather beautiful. So
my
and you are
gosh.
too. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you, Cheryl. Really, it was my honor and privilege and pleasure. Thank you. You're a remarkable woman yourself.
Well, I try.
It's been an honor. Thank you.
And so everybody get Karen's book. If you're going through anything, if you know of anyone who might be suffering through a loss of, anything, it doesn't have to be the loss of a loved one. There are such amazing insights in her book. And remember to show a little compassion and mercy to people who might say stupid things and just continue through life and just each breath, concentrate that each breath goes to the next minute, to the next day, to the next hour, to the rest of your life. So thank you so much for listening. And that is the way of the FemiNinja. And that's a wrap on another episode of the FemiNinja Project. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.